All right, there we go. Now my voice is coming through. I'll have to edit that bit out. Hi, kitty cats. No discussion about gender is safe from the phrase biological woman. But does biology confirm the meaning behind this phrase? Unfortunately, no. Like every other misuse of scientific jargon, biological woman is only a cheap distraction from the real argument. So, let's dissect the various and nebulous meanings behind biological woman and how they fail the test of science. All right, you will see down below here, there are several links. My name is Amethyst Herrick. I'm an author and a podcaster. And if you check these links below that are coming up, you will get more information about me and all the work that I do. My personal website, which will be coming up in a second, is amethysta.io. You will find all the social media networks I'm on, and you can follow me for updates on amethysta.io for everything I do on social media. The next one here, genderidentitytoday.com, that is my professional website. All of my articles and podcasts are published there, as well as work from other contributors. I would welcome work from other contributors. So if you like this content, I hope you'll consider subscribing at genderidentitytoday.com. You can get a subscription for as low as $2 a month, which is not, so bad. And if you would like to contribute content to Gender Identity Today, please contact me. Contact me through my personal website. There's a contact page there. And finally, if you'd like to leave a tip, it just went off the screen. That last link goes to coffee.com, and you can send a tip however you may feel fit. So let's go back to this idea of biological women. Why am I even interested in this? I saw a video recently by a transgender woman, and she was talking about herself and said almost apologetically that she's a transgender woman, not a biological woman. And she goes on to discuss her experience in a way that to me made it sound like it was a secondhand kind of an experience, an invalid experience. I felt that she was apologizing for her existence. She was admitting she wasn't entirely real. Real, I'll put that in some quotation marks there. So I started thinking about this phrase, biological women. And I started thinking about who uses this term too. It's usually thrown around in an attempt to invalidate transgender women. In fact, it reminds me very strongly of the phrase gender ideology, which also had no real definition before Trump signed his Defending Women executive order. And if you read that one, even the text of that is pretty dang vague. It does not at all capture what I've written in terms of gender and what many of us in the field of gender propose to use. So in this show here, what I want to do is investigate what the phrase biological woman could mean. Because if it's biological, then certainly biology must back it up, right? What it is they say, what they claim. Because it's using a term of gender, woman, but it implies that there are biological ways to define said woman. So I'm going to go to, the source of all truth. I'm going to look at what I found on the internet, because if you find it on the internet, it's probably true, right? And I want to investigate it all from the standpoint of biology and human development. Just so everybody knows, I do have a background in biology. I went through a total of 3 years in a molecular biology course at University of California, San Diego. Ended up switching to chemistry, but I went through most of the curriculum for a biology degree. So that's what how I want to discuss this. I don't want to discuss technicalities necessarily. Well, technically, that's not right. I just want to ask the question, are these definitions, is the way biological woman used actually supported by biology? Because I think the answer is no. So let's actually look, let's look at what I found on the internet. Here are some characteristics I found. Biological woman means biologically female. There's a vague phrase for you. A biological woman has XX chromosomes. A biological woman has female reproductive organs. A biological woman was assigned female at birth, and in this way is actually sometimes used, that I found, as a synonym for cisgender woman. I find that interesting. So this is what I've found on the internet. Now, before I start talking about it, I want to define some of my own terms first. Because we are talking about biology, I believe it's exceptionally important to use definitions from biology, not from politicians. This is very important. These definitions are very, very important because we're talking about science. We are not talking about humans only. We're talking the entire field of biology. So if we're going to say biological woman, I want this to be clear. I want it to be crisp. All right, the word sex. The word sex is something that comes from biology. It has to do with sexual reproduction. It's defined by biologists as the ability to contribute a particular gamete in an act of sexual reproduction. Sounds pretty vague. It also gives you the word gamete. What's a gamete? A gamete is a packet of genetic information that combines with another packet of genetic information in sexual reproduction. That's the definition of sexual reproduction. This is the mechanism of it. Most species that biologists have observed, most species, but not all, create two characteristic gametes. Only two characteristic gametes. And they are given names according to their relative sizes. So their size relative to each other. The smaller of the two gametes has a definition. That's called sperm. The larger of the two gametes also has a definition. That's called ovum. And to biologists, there are two final definitions. If you have an organism capable of contributing sperm in an act of reproduction, that organism is defined as male. And if you have an organism capable of contributing an ovum in an act of reproduction, that organism is defined as female. Now, I want to point out, these definitions span all species. They do not span, this is not just humans. These are biology's terms. They're not the terms of a politician. A politician cannot define these. They come from biology. They mean something more than whether a politician is going to be elected next year. So with these definitions, I want to look at biological woman. Let's start first looking at human birth. Let's talk about human birth, assigned female at birth. I will say, first of all, hello to everybody who's out there. I don't know if everybody's going to say hi, but I'm looking at Shakespeare. Hello, good to see you. Moving on to human birth. I said I wasn't going to talk about technicalities. Here is my one technicality of language. According to the internet, okay, the one common definition for woman is adult human female. Now that's inaccurate, obviously. We'll return to that, but that's inaccurate. But a common usage of biological woman is a state into which humans are born. Hey, Matt Adland is here as well. So if we do a substitution here, right, it's almost like math. We're going to substitute one definition into the other. If we substitute the common and inaccurate definition of woman into the common usage of biological woman, you will find that in order to satisfy biological woman, you must be born an adult human female. So chew on that one. There's my technicality. But you can already see we're probably going to have to twist a little bit of logic here. Or you have to twist some logic in order to use biological woman in a way that makes any vague semblance of sense. And even then, I don't think it works. So, all right, let's talk about the phrase assigned female at birth. Where does somebody get assigned female at birth? This is something that we as humans have stuck on a birth certificate. You have a doctor who looks at the newly born baby, makes a guess based on the anatomy, makes a judgment call, and then tells somebody, all right, stick an M or stick an F on that birth certificate. But it's a judgment call. It's a judgment call of a doctor. It so happens clerical errors happen, and they happen frequently. If you watched, I did an interview with Mara Starling It was a month or so back, I think, that it published, 4 to 6 weeks ago. But Mara tells a story about how she has this certificate. Sorry, I should mention, Mara is transgender, assigned male at birth, but she has a certificate that she got from the hospital where they had made a clerical error. Apparently, the certificate was used to file a birth certificate later on, and it shows her birth sex as female. Clerical errors happen. But also, like, medical errors happen too. I'd love to bring up the case of David Reimer. David Reimer was born, was getting a circumcision, so assigned male at birth, got a circumcision that went wrong because they were using the doctor was using a tool that he wasn't familiar with, and ended up messing up enough anatomy that they brought in a sexologist who said, you know what you need to do? Just get rid of it altogether. We'll just make a vulvoplasty, and this will be awesome. So David Reimer was assigned female at birth. And that was because that's what was recommended. David Reimer was not. Ended up going on to do something else. So ended up transitioning ultimately to return to how he felt, which was as a man. So I had the uncarved block here. Before I go on, the uncarved block says, I've literally never had an ad pop up while viewing a live video. I wish I could tell you what YouTube's doing, but I don't have a lot of command over that. So I apologize if that bothered you. All right, so assigned at birth. All right, assigned how? Often the judgment is clear based on genitalia. Often. Not always. We're going to return to this one, but that doesn't always work. Intersex births, for what it's worth, are estimated currently at about 1 in 200, so 0.5%. And that's actually probably low because we don't have a great record keeping across the globe. We also, some of these are not externally obvious. So that sounds like a very low number, right? You go, gosh, really? 1 in 200. That's a very low number. But let's think about this. 360,000, a little bit more than 360,000 births occur every day. That's a bit more than 4 births per second. In the time I chuckled there, 4 babies were born. Think about that. But that means 0.5%, 1,800, a little more than 1,800 intersex births every day. There is an intersex baby born every 48 seconds. Every day, all day, every week, all year, every 48 seconds. So I'm just going to sum this up right here. Assigned sex at birth can be wrong. Very clearly. Can be wrong. Biology is not upholding this particular definition, especially when we look at how Trump defined woman as adult human female. You can't be an adult when you're born. So when I've brought this up, people who say, oh, well, biological women, just go on to the next one, because they have like these levels that we're going to run through here, to go through all the circuitous route from biological woman definition to biological woman definition. So we'll move on to the next one then, which is external genitalia. Before I do, let me check these comments. I see the uncarved block is gone. Oh, well. So Matt says, I was AMAB when I was born, but I'll be ACAB till I die. For the life of me, I wish I could remember what ACAB means. Because I read that and I go, assigned cops at birth, assigned crazy at birth, assigned kukamanga at birth. I forget. So help me out, Matt. Nijo says, first of all, hi, hey, mommy. Hello, daughter. Good to see you. Nijo read the title as opposed to the lack of science behind biological women, the lack of science behind biomechanical women, which, there's probably a lot of science in there. So, all right, regarding assigned sex at birth, Matt says doctors literally guessed based on superficial characteristics. Not guessing would mean karyotyping every child before deciding on sex. And I'm not even confident you would end up doing you would end up doing a karyotype. You could look at genotype. We're going to go through it all, actually. So stay tuned there. So Nijo brings up, yeah, adult human female at conception. At conception, right? That's like, it's even better. So you have to be an adult human female at conception. This comes from the executive order, by the way, just that if you didn't know. Here's a great. So Vanessa LeBlanc brings up, never mind, there is no I for intersex next to the MNF available selections for doctors to pick on that birth certificate. So Vanessa falls under the I and the T. Actually, forgive me, what's the T? Oh, for transgender? Or, I'm sorry, help me out with that one, Vanessa. Anyway, let me move on. Nijo, you've got a great question, and we're going to move into some of this. Let's talk about genitalia, just for fun. Talk about genitalia. I did do some discussion around intersex birth, clerical errors, medical errors, but for the most part, can't we just say, is genitalia an accurate measure? As it turns out, there are babies born with naturally occurring, we use the word defects. This is a medical term, not mine. I don't really care for that term because it implies that if you are shaped slightly differently, you're in some way defective. I don't like that. But there are babies born every day, missing fingers or toes. You got one arm shorter than the other, leg twisted out or something. I mean, I can look at my own legs. One foot actually points out, well, it's coming up weird on the screen, but my right foot points out a little bit more because my right knee is twisted a little bit. Some of these things can occur just from environment. You have a mother who's smoking, drinking, maybe in an environment where somebody is smoking. Maybe she uses other substances and is in an environment with other substances. And these can just happen because biology follows the path of least resistance. Biology is about thermodynamics, not design. And even without identifiable, what we would consider an identifiable intersex characteristic, you can have babies born with ambiguous genitalia. So what do we do in that case? Do you just make a guess? Do you go, I don't know, F? I don't know. Is that good enough for politics? Like if somebody guessed and just said, we're just going to put F, is that enough for assigned female at birth? Does that make you a biological woman if a doctor guesses? Is that enough for politics? How about this question? Is it good enough for biology? Absolutely not. Because if we're going to have a definition, and it's going to be scientific, if we are going to invoke the word biological, there needs to be an ironclad definition here. We're not going to get that. You know why? Because it's biology. Biology is based on thermodynamics and in some cases randomness. So genitalia right now is already not a good measure for biological woman, period. It's just the way it works. So now I'm going to have somebody who's going to go, well, we'll go the next level down. What about a female reproductive system? Ooh, this is a great idea. Let's return to the idea of adult human female and those definitions. I told you the definitions were important. Female means able to contribute a gamete. So a female reproductive system would be one that can reproduce. That implies sexual maturity. And that implies a long causal chain of genetic, biochemical, and really worldly fortune, right? The child needs to make it to the age of sexual maturity, to get into pubertal age. The child needs to avoid any accidents that might prevent sexual maturity. And I know you go, oh, whatever. Yeah, in the United States, it's easy to let that go. When you have children who are 4 years old working out in a field, makes a difference. You also, the child also has to have the biochemistry work out enough to get the kid to sexual maturity. Hormonal balances have to work out. There's a long biochemical causal chain here. So that's the child. What about after menopause? After menopause, you have women who are not able to reproduce. Is that still a female reproductive system? Is a female reproductive system defined by shape, by parts, or is it defined by operation? the ability to operate. And what about women who have had, say, PCOS, polycystic ovary syndrome? Many of them have their entire reproductive system removed. Are those still adult human females? So let's sum up here. We're looking at genitalia, female reproductive system here. Biology's not holding this up either. Genitalia can be ambiguous, and reproductive systems don't always allow reproduction. And so now we have the next bit come up, right? Well, we'll go the next level down. What about the probability? The probability of being able to contribute a gamete. Now, of course, we're going to look at genetics. But let me go back to comments really fast. So Nijo says, okay, so Nijo, I'm still going to push this back. But Nijo does ask, don't all fetuses start with XXY until sex starts to be determined, where one of the father's contributing genes and either the X or Y gets dropped? I'm going to tell you my understanding of human development doesn't go that way. There may be subtleties that I'm not aware of, but to my understanding, the quick answer is no. I'm going to talk a little bit about that though in the next section, so maybe we'll bring this back up. So here we go. So Matt says they start out anatomically intersex. So they start out anatomically blank. Really? So we'll talk that in just a moment. So let me see. Chromosomes are established very early in natal development. So briefly, when those two things combine, when you have two gametes combine, that is the combination. So you end up with a semi-random kind of distribution of the mother's chromosomes and the father's chromosomes. And in the process of meiosis, you actually have, so this is the creation of gametes. The body will take half of its genetic information and splat it into a gamete. And so you end up with a total of 4 different combinations, right? Because we have 2 chromosomes, we have chromosome pairs that split apart. Those can get splatted into ova and sperm, and then so that's how you end up with 4. So 4 different combinations that you can have from that. And this gets more and more, gets bigger and bigger, right? So if you have 2 different ways that a gene can express, now you have 4 squared, so 16. So this turns into a big, large probability chain that's actually kind of fun. It's a good time. Well, I mean, this is why I went into genetics in the first place. But there we go. So let's see. Vanessa has given some more information. So let's see. For context, I was born with extra parts. Oh, interesting. But because it looked more male, I got assigned M. I'm curious if that was clitoromegaly. Okay, so years later, a doctor realized I was intersex, and that made a ton of sense since I never identified male. Yeah, crazy. That's really interesting. All right. Let's look at genetics. One of the things that I said at the beginning, because I got this off the internet, a woman has XX chromosomes. And unfortunately, that's not actually how human development works. Like the way you end up with a female reproductive system is not because you have XX chromosomes. There are a couple of things at work here. First of all, a human embryo is subject to the entire environment of the mother's uterus for 9 months, I might mention, from conception to birth. Some of these pathways get locked out when they start going down a direction, but some of them don't. I've talked about this in several places, several other videos that I could refer to if you wanted more, but the way that reproductive systems end up being defined is through one gene called the SRY gene. This is associated with the male reproductive systems. In typical operation, what happens is that you have an embryo with an XY genotype, and the embryo creates something called SRY protein. I should probably give a definition. SRY, believe it or not, stands only for sex-determining region of the Y chromosome, which is somewhat inaccurate. I'll get there, but SRY protein is just the protein made by the sex-determining region of the Y chromosome. Biologists are horrible with nomenclature. That's sort of the bit there. So the embryo creates SRY protein. And what that does is stimulate the mother to secrete testosterone. The embryo cannot secrete testosterone. The embryo does not have any organs capable of secreting testosterone. The mother has to. The mother's testosterone is what stimulates testis growth originally in the embryo. So where is this SRY gene? Well, typically, hopefully the name gave it away, the sex-determining region of the Y chromosome, typically it's on a Y chromosome. But we observe it to translocate as well. We have seen the SRY gene translocate to the X chromosome. So it's still on chromosome pair 23. I held up 2 fingers, like that's 23. I don't know. So we've seen the SRY gene translocate, so move, to the X chromosome. But we've also seen the SRY gene move to allosomes. So these are not sex chromosomes. These are chromosomes 1 through 22. We've seen it move there too. We've watched this happen. The other interesting point, and just as a quick aside, the Y chromosome is really resistant to evolution. We talked a little bit about meiosis, how a body ends up creating gametes. Because of the way meiosis works, you have a Y chromosome that's very resistant to evolution because it can't take part in recombination, in actual recombination during meiosis and then fertilization. There's no recombination. So it's actually predicted to evolve out of the human genome at the very least, and other mammals, because the Y chromosome's just weird, does weird things. But all of this came from probability. So I talked about the SRY gene, but I talked about all of this because we have people who say, well, biological woman means people who would probably become women. Probability. So this is a long causal chain. You have to create an embryo. The embryo has to have the SRY gene. The embryo has to be able to express the SRY gene. The SRY protein has to stimulate the mother, and then the testosterone has to stimulate the embryo. It typically works, but it's not crisp biochemistry by any means. The embryo may not express the SRY gene strongly. Just the way it works. Biology is funky. Sometimes we express genes strongly, sometimes we don't. Embryo may not express the SRY strongly. The mother may not be sensitive to SRY protein and as a result not actually secrete testosterone. The embryo may not be very sensitive to the mother's testosterone. So even if you have an XY chromosome, there is no guarantee that you're going to end up with a female reproductive system. But also, think about this as well. Mothers are sometimes naturally abundant in testosterone. And if it is testosterone, the mother's testosterone that stimulates testis development, an XX embryo may also be highly sensitive to testosterone, and you'll end up with an XX embryo that develops male reproductive parts. So we have seen these both. XY genotypes that develop female reproductive parts, XX genotypes that develop male reproductive parts. So if we're talking about probability, let's talk about probability because we started talking about it in the comments here. Every single human embryo has a probability of developing female reproductive organs. And every single human embryo has a probability of developing male reproductive organs. So Nijo brought up the executive organ uses the executive order, not organ, uses the phrase at conception. And biologists, I'm speaking as a scientist here, biologists have no way to predict confidently what's going to happen after conception. No way. We have no test that's going to allow us to figure that out. Now, I could at this point, we could talk about hormonal balance, the amount of hormones that the actual levels of hormones and the ratio of the hormones that the embryo is subjected to, and Nijo and I have a long conversation going on about that. But I'm not even going to bother. Like at this point, it's not even worth talking about this. I want to move on because let's think back once again to the definition of sex. Do you remember I said it's really the ability to contribute a gamete in an act of reproduction? This is why it's defined so vaguely. because there's no guarantees in genetics, in biochemistry. This is why they do that. They say, look, you have one act of reproduction, that's fine. We can define whether you're male or female in this act of reproduction. If you can contribute an ovum, you're female. Go at it. But anything else is extraneous. When it comes to sex, the definition of sex, biochemistry is extraneous, behavior is extraneous, social pressures are extraneous. But that's entirely okay. And that's because biologists defined a new word that encompasses all of that. The individual biochemistry, behavior, especially in context of social pressures, and that's gender. So, we could talk about that another time, but it is kind of an important subject to me. So to sum this up here, genetics is a guidepost. It is not an infallible system. Genetics, the expression of genetics are subject to environment, and the resulting biochemistry can still go directions we don't even expect. So genetics and biochemistry also do not uphold biological woman. Born a woman is just not crisply defined here. All right, let me jump to comments. But I'm all done with the science here. I've gone through almost everything that I've ever heard in terms of biological woman. So I want to talk about the purpose of biological woman. But let me see what I got here. Hopefully, Matt and Nijo, I talked enough about how an embryo develops. But let's see what we got. Autistic. Oh, Matt, you're just being nitpicky and autistic. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm just going to tell you right there. So let's see. Matt says blank would be a better phrasing for what an embryo is, because it's really sort of zip there. But Matt says autistic people rule. There you go. But only in a hyperbolic and metaphorical way. We're not actually in charge, and we generally don't support autocracies. Isn't that the truth? All right. Shakespeare says here, I need an executive organ. Not sure what that is, but pretty sure I need one. What I think an executive organ would be, this is how you end up becoming like in executive management. Like there must be some sort of organ inside, right? Because we all know that white men are much more suited to for executive management, which must mean they have some special organ, right? Maybe, maybe not. All right. What's the purpose of the phrase biological woman? I think I've gone through quite a bit here. We see that the doctors and record keepers can make mistakes. Assigned sex at birth is subject to errors. External genitalia is not perfectly formed on every baby, and it doesn't even have to be intersex characteristics. Reproductive systems take time to mature, and they stop working at some point. This is the way mammals work, actually. If we go further down, genetics is notoriously fuzzy, and biochemistry is notoriously fickle, because there are a lot of things that go into expression of genetics that we don't entirely even understand. So I want to consider the question, why was this term introduced at all? Because if we were to say, look at my body, I match somebody assigned female at birth who had a total hysterectomy. Right now, both of us would get hormone replacement therapy. Both of us have a vagina, an external vulva, and neither of us has a vagina capable of reproduction. How am I different? Perhaps more importantly, why am I different? I think there's only one answer. The phrase biological woman was never intended to invoke science. They don't want to use some sort of phrase that actually means something. The biological woman was introduced so that we would be confused, so that the phrase could obfuscate the purpose. And what is it designed to obscure? It's designed to obscure that gender is only loosely tied to biology. And that includes prenatal development, where there are many factors we still don't even understand. In fact, probably many factors we don't know exist. And if you're familiar with it, there's a logical flaw that's named the True Scotsman. logical flaw. So the true Scotsman, where you can say something like, yeah, you may do that, but no true Scotsman would do that. It's not a logical argument you can combat, which is why it's a logical fallacy. By the way, because it invokes nothing. What the hell is a true Scotsman? It's the same thing, though. What the hell is a biological woman? It can't be defined, and it's not supposed to. This is double speak with some whiff of science that it can't back up in any way. At base, the phrase biological woman is a weapon used against people who can't give a lecture like this one. And believe it or not, I think that's probably a significant portion of the United States. I mean, I can go and do and do my own research here. I've spent a lot of time in science, but most people don't, and most people won't. I don't think that's a slight against most people in the United States. It's really, a finger pointed at anybody who wants to use the phrase biological woman. This is a political club currently being used to bash transgender women into believing that we are in some way invalid. And I'll remind you, the only reason I wanted to do this stream is because there was a transgender woman I watched in a video. I talked about her at the beginning of the stream. She was almost apologetic. She was like, listen, I know I don't really exist. I know I'm not a real woman. I know I'm not a biological woman. Where's the value in that? When each of us believes, any of us believes we're invalid, we don't fight for who we are. This weapon, the weapon biological woman, is necessary to maintain control. It's a tool for discrimination and nothing else. And that's not control over transgender women only, because I think I've raised enough questions about the phrase biological women to make you wonder, do women with PCOS, do they get ejected? Do people with different chromosomes than biological women users would want, do they get ejected? Do people with intersex characteristics get ejected? Could this club be used to bash other women down the road? You better believe it. You better believe it's going to. So what's the next step? Because, I don't want to just leave you hanging. What do I think is next? First of all, stop misusing science. It's so amazing to me to see the discrimination justified with scientific concepts that don't even fit what the politicians are saying. And these only come about because people don't know enough to challenge them. This is why I'm doing what I'm doing. That's the first thing. Stop misusing science. The second thing, use science. Use science the way we actually do science. Observe what's around us. Anybody can do this. Can you observe what's around you? Guess what? You just became a scientist. Good job. I'll give you the little scientist badge. I'll send it out. Send a self-addressed stamp envelope and 13 cents. Now we'll send you your scientist badge that you can put on your your lapel there. It'll be awesome. You can wear it to Congress along, right next to your American flag. But observe what you see around us. Biology is messy. Biologists know it's messy. We've always known it's messy. And that's why the definitions are by nature vague. What we observe around us is what we need to use. And that feeds into my third point here, which is that political systems, if you're going to make a political system, it's got to serve all people. Maybe we can say, all right, sure, you came up with counterexamples, I guess, but, these are counterexamples that are small, they're small proportions. It doesn't make a difference. We can really just sort of sweep them under the rug. The proportions are small, but when you put them into context, globally, 8 billion people, the number of people is big. Out of 8 billion people, 80 million, let's say it's 1%, and I still think that's low. 80 million people are transgender. That's about the population of the country of Germany. Even if it's only 1 out of 200, that is 40 million intersex people out there, which I believe is the population of Holland, if I remember correctly. I'm forgetting, but then like the Netherlands. So 40 million people are intersex, and we don't really know what the proportions ought to be. They're probably higher. You're looking at more than 1 billion people, right? Oh no, you're not. Sorry. Apparently I can't do math. But you're looking at, more than 100 million people. That's a lot of people. It's not a small proportion. We can't just ignore certain data points or science altogether because it doesn't suit your political agenda. Political systems have to serve all people. And if you're going to try to use science to justify mean politics, that's where I got to draw a line. All right. Hopefully this was fun. Hopefully this was an interesting little bit. Let me check comments again. We have, let's see. So that was all I was going to say, by the way. Sorry, I'm all done, finally. That's everything I was going to say. And I wanted to end on that little point there. So, so Shakespeare says exactly what I need. I only have executive dysfunction. That's a different kind of ED than I heard. Oh, need a little more disorder. So actually executive organ, so Nijo says the brain, according to the brain. Isn't that a great point? The more we study the human body, it's really great. The more we study the human body, we're like, well, the brain controls everything. I mean, there's probably like something like around the heart too. All right, and there's something like near the gut that we figure does. Okay, and maybe even something like the brain stemmy kind of thing, and but that's it, right? Except we think there might be something close to the genitals. And if you've ever looked at Indian chakras, so like the actual 7 points that go up and down your spinal column, a little differently, but somewhere in front. But point being that if you look at those, it's interesting. Modern science finds a lot of nerve centers in those areas. Ooh, kind of creepy, isn't it? The brain is the executive organ according to the brain. It's very true. All right. Let's see. Matt says, nope. Oh darn. Matt is a white man, and the only organ which makes him a man is a terror when it comes to making good choices. That's funny. I loved that. You cracked me up. All right. Vanessa has said, I think for myself, being born in the 70s with a lack of medical awareness of intersex people, combined with religious social upbringing, was extremely detrimental to her life. I'm going to assume she, her pronouns, Vanessa. Hopefully that's right. Vanessa says this needs to change. So I grew up in the 1970s as well. There was a lack of awareness around transgender people as well. Certainly, we had not even begun the Human Genome Project. That was when we were growing up. When I started learning about genetics, this is a crazy story. I think it was my 4th grade elementary school teacher was like, listen, you have free time on your hands. Here's like a book about genetics. I don't really know how like complicated it was. I mean, it was 4th grade is 9 or 10. So I was like 9 or 10 years old, but I was reading something then, and that's what fueled my interest in genetics. Because I've said this before, I thought that it could help me fix what was wrong with me, meaning being transgender. And Vanessa, maybe you felt the same. And if you did, that is extremely detrimental to our lives. So I'm sorry that you had to go through that, because believe it or not, I can relate at the very least. Nijo says she laughs when she hears people say real men don't wear skirts. And then she says, go say that the Highland Games and get your ass thrown over a barn. Isn't it crazy? Those people they can throw things like picking up big ass rocks or something and rolling down the hill with them. It's really, a lot of me just goes, I could never be a true Scotsman. I think that's pretty think that's pretty much the point. I like this. Matt has said real men identify as men. It's the only such claim that's factually accurate. And I think that leads into precisely what we've been talking about, that real women are those who identify as women. There are obviously physical characteristics that I do not deny, but biology is only an aspect of identity, and gender is a part of our identity. Our identity also encompasses our thoughts, our emotions. It encompasses the choices that we make in our behavior. And all of these are going to be colored by the social environment around us. We see it through the lens of our social environment. Because what's good? Typically what our social environment teaches us. Real women identify as women? Sure, I go along with that. All right, Vanessa says definitions are weaponized out of sheer ignorance. I agree, but I'll need to change that. Well, I agree. So Vanessa also says it's so cruel to force people into narrow definitions. So Grief Foundation is not here. Grief Foundation, if you watch this later on, you may be thinking, wow, gosh, she named me. Because Grief Foundation has said, we do need some. There are purposes for defining sex. There are purposes for defining gender. Political social reasons for defining these terms and defining them crisply, so that we can put people into these definitions. I don't know that I entirely agree. I mean, one reason was supposed to be so that people can be safe in bathrooms. I mean, it's not the physical parts of somebody that makes them unsafe in a bathroom. It's behavior that somebody ends up choosing. I don't know why that isn't thought about, but so you could say that. You could also talk about sports. But there are, like, if you look at say chess or Go is an even better a better example. Chess and Go have classifications, categories based on your capability. How good are you at the game? Like, they're going to pitch you against somebody. Like, you're not going to be, I just learned how to do Go. I think I got one of those things in a corner, right? I forget what the term of that was. I forget. Anyway, see, this is why I'm very low level at Go. But they're not going to pit me, who sucks at Go, against like the winner of Go tournaments, because they're like, look, we can figure out it's going to be a quick game and it's going to suck for you. And it probably would. So we already do this with chess. We do it with Go. We do it with intellectual endeavors, games that are more intellectual endeavors. Does it make a difference if we do that with physical endeavors? I don't see why. If you have somebody who's a poor swimmer, somebody assigned male at birth who's a poor swimmer, who wants to swim poorly against people assigned female at birth who are really good swimmers, hey, good on you. Go make a fool out of yourself by losing, really badly. What's the diff? The only difference there is that maybe they came out of different locker rooms. There's capability seems to make more sense here. The one place where Grief Foundation made a point that I don't think is a bad one is when you look at medicine. You can say, well, women, people assigned male at birth typically don't need things like pap smears. People assigned female at birth don't generally need prostate exams. I mean, this is accurate. And I will certainly say that those two categories are not what, drives the medical community. What drives the medical community is, do you have a cervix? Because, I mean, if you had PCOS and you may not even have a cervix now, you also don't need a pap smear. But according to your birth certificate, you might be assigned female at birth. If you have prostate cancer, you may no longer have much of a prostate to check. So even then, medicine is something that is very individual. You look at the individual person. So Anyway, all of this came from, is it cruel to force people into narrow definitions? I believe so. I mean, each of us is so different. Why do we have to do this? The only reason I can come up with is for politics. People get stuck into narrow categories so that some people can control other people. All right, I'm going to get off that particular comment. It's like 5 minutes on one comment. Let's see. Nijo says, consider the traffic to particular adult content and where it's from. So, here's an interesting tidbit. Well, I'm not sure where all we were going with that, Nijo, but here's an interest. Oh, shoot, what was my interesting tidbit? So, particular adult content. Oh, yeah. So, it's really interesting to me to find that it's typically conservative men who are watching transgender content. Why is that? I wonder. Anyway, all right. If haters, so here's Matt's comment. If haters are showing up on a trans woman's social media, they got there from searching for trans women. I tend to get some comments that say, why is your crap showing up in my feed? Well, YouTube's not going to show you something it doesn't think you're going to want to see. That's the purpose of YouTube. YouTube would be really bad at selling advertisements if it weren't great at finding out what you want to watch. So you tell me why I showed up on your feed. I can't answer that question for you. All right, so Nietzsche says suddenly, oh, wait, sorry. Maybe this was the follow-on. So it says suddenly this 1% jumps from 1% to anywhere from 5 to 10%. It's a good question. It's a good question. So Matt says, 1 to 2% is intersex. There are wild variations in these guesses. The values we use for transgender are self-identified. And if I got a census form and it said, do you identify, I'm sure they don't do this on the census, although possibly the 2026 census, who knows if this is going to be on it. Do you identify as transgender so that we can come and take your ass away? But if I got a census form and somebody said, do you identify as transgender? I probably would have, like 4 years ago, I probably would have checked no. Certainly not. Transgender people are people who transition to me, at least 4 years ago. My thoughts have changed on this now, but self-identification is not a great, especially for a category that is as historically oppressed as transgender people. You're not going to identify as that if you think it's going to harm you. Intersex, we can generally tell with if there's not an external expression, we can see endocrinological expression. Wow, struggling with that. But it's medical. Some of these things take genetic tests. There are things that, like, I would never have known some of the intersex characteristic I'm supposed to have unless I started gender transition, which I did, by the way, just to make that bit clear. So, I mean, even saying 1 out of 200, we know that there are over 1,200 identified intersex characteristics, most of them not external. Most of them require genetic tests, or they take, they only present in somewhat edge situations, edge cases. So, all right, so here we go. Nijo makes the point, speaking of chakras, a lot of people seem to have their crown chakra and the root chakra. Yeah, so a lot of people have their brain in their pants. I like that. That's funny. So you did just Google this, Nijo, that Google says 1.7% for intersex expression. I mean, see, it varies a lot. The value varies a lot. Matt says could be as high as 7%. It's badly understudied. And really, honestly, it's not because we choose to. Well, I guess we do. We choose not to take genetic samples from every single person who's born. I don't think that's a bad thing, personally. but we don't, I mean, all of our medicine, Western medicine certainly, is based on pathology. Do we have symptoms that show that something is wrong? If one of those things that is wrong is an intersex characteristic, because I mean, like, who knows? Maybe when I was in my 60s, I don't really know. I was tired quite a bit before I transitioned gender. I'm still tired, but mainly I'm just tired of what's going on in the country. I was tired quite a bit. And I suspect that could be because I just didn't process testosterone very well. That's one of the classic, low testosterone symptoms. Oh, you're always tired. You're putting on weight, whatever. But if I had gone to an endocrinologist, if I had gone to an endocrinologist, maybe he would have checked my blood concentrations and gone, you're fine. You're fine. You got a great testosterone. Look at how high this testosterone is. There are people in their 20s who would kill for this level of testosterone. And I would go, well, why am I still fat and tired? And he'd go, don't know. So anyway, yeah, it's understudied, I think, only because we don't really necessarily know how to study it. How do you do that? When we're not looking necessarily for, that's a lot of necessarily's. How do you study that when we're not looking for symptoms? So anyway, here we go. Dudes who rant about bathrooms just want hot dolls. Dudes. All right. Dudes who rant about bathrooms just want hot dolls in the bathroom with them. And it's creepy AF. It really is. Is that something like, I have heard, I actually asked this question once, and I don't remember where it was. Some video somewhere I said, is there really somebody who has been convicted, like a person who is not transgender, who dressed up in women's clothing to go into the bathroom? Was this really a real thing? And somebody said, yes, like 30 years ago. I think honestly it was during the 1990s, maybe the 2000s. There was one case in Scotland. No, that was it. I'm like, this is the only like historical evidence that I understand exists. I haven't gone and done a really big like search on it. I don't have whatever it is, LexisNexis kind of access here, so I can look at all cases, criminal cases in the world. But my understanding is that this is not something that's happened frequently. I will bring up again, because I think it's worthwhile. I will bring up again, in terms of assault, physical assault, emotional assault, sexual assault, the bulk is domestic. The bulk, I don't remember the exact number. It was between 2/3 and 3/4, more than 66%. So it was like 68, 72% is domestic, and it happens from your family. We should think about that, because if we could reduce assault against anybody by 2/3, holy cats, wouldn't that be effective? Wouldn't that get you your third term? Right? Let's think about that. All right, here we go. So, Nijo, I'm not sure. I wish I understood where this followed onto. Maybe I missed it. But Nijo says, the one that will remove anti-trans protections in the workplace, before you know it, everyone is shouting slurs, and that leads to physical violence. The sad thing is that, transgender people, statistically, are about, I think it was two or somewhere between 2 and 3 times more likely to experience assault, physical violence, sexual assault. We are ones who are victims. So Nijo says she's being tested again for intersex stuff. Ooh, who's doing that? I'm curious. Like, I sent stuff off to 23andMe, and I got a crap ton. They have a ton of data because I paid for the good data because I'm a geneticist, right? I like genetics. What the hell? Not a geneticist, but I do love genetics. And, I said, I'm going to look at this all. And then I got it, and I was like, I'm not going to look at this at all. Because I got it because I was like, I wonder if I have any intersex characteristics. And then I started transitioning and I was like, I don't really care. Because the point is, I'm transitioning. I think I'll let it go. So, all right. I'm getting ready to close this down here. Let me read these couple of quick funny comments. Matt says, hell, I'm wearing a trans pride shirt today and glaring at conservatives whenever I catch their eye. I love that. I wonder if they see you wearing that, they go, dang, is that a transgender man? Because, wow. Just saying. Matt says this means that you will have to go through me, and and he's wearing it with camouflage pants and combat boots. I love that. That's pretty cool. Matt mentions, so Nijo asks, do you have like a mohawk and a studded up patchwork battle jacket? Oh, didn't ask about the mohawk, but so Matt says he looks like a Viking, 6 feet tall, 220 pounds, and not a fat guy. I have seen photographs of Matt without a shirt on. Just saying. That's all kinds of man. All right. I want to thank everybody who showed up. I'm showing more people than were in the chat, and I don't know if that's because I got some funny things going on with Streamlabs, because it kind of looks like maybe, but so I will say thank you to Shakes, thanks to Matt, thank you to Nijo and Vanessa, and anybody I have not mentioned because you didn't put your name in the chat. I just want to say thank you so much to all of you. I do this, because I hope that the education means something, and hopefully it means something to the world at large. So I'm going to throw out a heart, my little cutesy heart thing, and say thank you again, and I'll see you next week. I think. Yeah, probably next week. All right. Bye.